That's really cool. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the weekly webinar. We're super happy to have you with us for this we have one more webinar this month. Today's only June 20th. So June is not quite over yet, although it has been a full month with lots of great stuff, and that certainly will continue today. Thank you, everyone, for muting yourselves and for being a part of our program today. We are recording, and I will make the recording available after we're finished today. If you have any questions while we're visiting today, please do use the chat function, and I'll watch that. I'm sure Mr. Newsom will be happy to entertain some questions. If you need closed captioning, you can find that in your tools on your Zoom screen and enable the captioning. And I think those are all of the announcements for now. So we'll shift over to introducing our speaker, who I'm very glad to welcome back to the webinar. Ed Newsom was a guest on the weekly webinar last July. So a whole year has gone by already. And, they say time flies when you're having fun. So we must have been having a wonderful year. And when last we spoke, Mr. Newsom had just published, and his family, his brothers and sisters, had published their book about their dad. And the title of that book is A Man Called Mama. And I had the pleasure of reading about it and reading about their wonderful family, and even wishing I could have been along on some of their farm adventures in Texas. And then, of course, Mr. Newsom moved up here to Kansas City, had more adventures with his family, and we're lucky that he chose to make Kansas City his home. Mr. Newsom has a bachelor's degree from UMKC and a law degree also from UMKC. He is an Army veteran, was deployed to Vietnam, led his men into battle, which is very exciting sounding. And also, I'm happy to share, he was awarded a Bronze Star with Valor, 10 other medals, and even under fierce enemy attack, never lost a man. So we have a real hero with us today in more ways than one. A veteran, a son, a sibling, a spouse, and a father, as we will hear in just a moment. He's also a world traveler. If you got to see the webinar last summer, we got to see some pictures, I think, of the pyramids, I remember. And when I opened up the new book, I saw some words about a trip to Athens, Greece. So we've got someone who knows a lot about the world around us. And also, Mr. Newsom has been the president of the board of directors, or the Board of Education for Kansas City Public Schools, part of the National Down Syndrome Congress, and several other organizations. He is married to Cynthia Newsom, former anchor on KSHB Channel 41. He likes to do crossword puzzles and play Scrabble. We are going to have to play some Scrabble together someday, I think. That would be great. And many of us on the call today are quite interested in keeping our brains sharp and always asking if crossword puzzles and Sudoku and all those things are good. So I think you have a vote in their favor, everybody on the call, for Mr. Newsom. So today we're going to focus on his new book, which is, I forgot I have this background on, so you might not be able to see it very well, but it's called Down Syndrome and the Power of a Father's Love. And I have read it. I picked it up on Saturday at the book signing. I got it autographed, so it's very special to me. And I finished reading it Tuesday night, just in time for today and our conversation, Mr. Newsom. So I'm happy to welcome you today, and let's talk. Let's talk about the book. So welcome, and tell us why you are now the author of this book. What led you to share these words at this time?
Well, let me just say hello and thank you very much for having me on. You really know my bio, don't you?
Really? Yes, I know all your business.
Well, I'm happy to see so many people. We have a full board today. I'm happy to so many
Yeah.
people who are on, and I'm very excited about this book. This book was really written for a couple different reasons, but the main reason is to encourage and empower fathers fathers, especially who has a child with Down syndrome or who may be expecting to have a child with Down syndrome. And I thought that it was necessary to write this book, one of which I've been pondering for a number of years. But it really hit me hard when my son was born, and there was very little information out at the time for fathers. There was quite a bit of information, and rightly so, for mothers, for moms, and so basically I had to kind of like self-educate to really find out what to expect and what needed to be done for my son, and to help him to achieve to the maximum level that he could. And so that was my impetus for writing this book. And but when I look at it, Down syndrome and the power of a father's love, when we really think about it, the power of a father's love is important with any child, can have a monumental impact on any child, because so many children, whether they have special needs or not, many times there's not a father in the house or around very long, around very often. So I just want to encourage dads and fathers and grandparents, who have the responsibility to raise children with Down syndrome and with other needs, because I believe that everything that we need to be a successful parent is already inside of us. And I just happen to be a man of faith, who believe that God does not give special children just to anybody. I think he's very selective. God is very selective who he wants to raise his children. So I'll just kind of pause there for a minute. So if you got any further questions for me,
Yes, of course.
I have until 5 o'clock. So
Okay. Well, yes, I certainly have more questions. I have had the honor of meeting EJ,
yes.
EJ too, who is quite delightful, and I really love his commitment to the California sports teams. As I am a California native, I am from Los Angeles, and although I do root for all the Kansas City and the Kansas and Missouri teams, California teams have a special place in my heart. And so I'm very charmed to have talked to EJ on Saturday, and to read in his biography that he likes some sports teams, but only if they are from California. And I really feel like that's a perfectly wonderful qualifier. But that being said, the question that I actually want to ask you is that EJ and I are about the same age. So he's 45, I think, if I did the math right. Is that right?
Yeah, he's 45.
He's 45. Okay. And I'm 48. And I'm bringing that up because I think, and I got a sense of this from the book, that in 1979, when EJ would have been born, what we knew about Down syndrome was very different than what we know now. So we've come a long way in terms of education and nurturing and science and all that good stuff. And one of the chapters in your book talks about how kind of at sea, maybe is a good description, you felt when you have this brand new baby and you love him so much, and you also recognize that things are going to maybe be different than you expected as a brand new father. And I'd love for you to tell our audience kind of what you thought then and what you might tell a family new to the Down syndrome experience today in 2024.
Well, one of the things that I want to say is that life does not stop when you have a baby who's born with Down syndrome. For me, it was the very beginning, because he was my first child. I have a second child, a daughter who was adopted at birth. But my suggestion would be that you take everything that you have on the inside of you and love that child, love him, and to really create a bonding relationship that would begin to last forever, because bonding never stops. When my late wife was pregnant with Edward, and we did not know that he would have Down syndrome before he was born, so it was a total shock to us. We had gone through all of the prenatal kind of screening types of things, but no one ever even mentioned that was a possibility. But even before he was born, I would read to and talk to and sing to the womb to really help him to know who I was even before he was born. And so by the time that he was born, we already knew one another. And so my message to all parents, especially if the child has a special need, is to just get in the saddle and just learn to love and do and find out, study. If you don't know already, find out what you can do to help the child develop to this fullest potential. When my son was even less than a month old, I was already taking him to physical and therapists, to just get ahead of what his needs would be. And frankly, I enjoyed doing things for him because of my love for him. And so when I write about the power of a father's love, that's just not a phrase. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of life. It's just who I am. Who we are. And so yeah, the information that's available now compared to then is there's a monumental difference. And so I'm trusting that we all would be about trying to learn and trying to do as much as we can for our child.
I mentioned that some of our audience today, or even people that might watch the recording of this at some point in the future, might be wondering why the KU Alzheimer's Disease Research Center is doing a webinar on Down syndrome. Like, what is the connection? Why is this happening? And so I certainly could explain that, but I would love to hear from you, Mr. Newsom, what your family's understanding of that might be and why it matters. Why are we talking about Down syndrome on an Alzheimer's webinar?
Well, I'm very pleased to be associated with you. I had an opportunity to meet you about I don't know, a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I was just beginning to find out then that there is a genetic connection, I believe, between Down syndrome and Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. And to have this connection with you is very special, because I would want to know even more about what the connection is and what to expect. And I've talked with some other doctors who are familiar, with this connection, and some of them say that there's 100% chance that anybody who has Down syndrome is very likely to also be impacted with Alzheimer's as they get older. And fortunately, my son, at this point in time, to my knowledge, has not shown any signs of some of the Alzheimer's attributes or characteristics. And so, but this knowledge gives me forewarning to be aware and to prepare and to find and to make sure that I understand, what to look for and how to approach this situation if it happens. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm very happy about this connection, about this relationship with you, Kelly.
Great. I am too, for obvious reasons. And I'll add to that for anybody who, for whom this was new information. We know that there is some correlation. There is a relationship between a person who has Down syndrome and the likelihood of their developing Alzheimer's disease later in life. This is something that I don't think was quite as clear to the neurological community even in 1979. It's a newer development, something that we're learning more about every day. We know a lot about how Alzheimer's disease happens. We don't yet know if there is a single button or reason that any one person might get Alzheimer's disease. We also know that when someone has Down syndrome, they have what's called trisomy of the 21st chromosome. And there's several varieties, which Mr. Newsom does a really great job of explaining in his book, the different types of that variation. But we do know that if someone who has Down syndrome lives to be in their even late 40s, early 50s, the likelihood of Down syndrome increases. And that's kind of a double-edged sword because it does mean life expectancy for someone with Down syndrome is increasing. People can live longer with Down syndrome than we think they could a generation ago. The risk that comes along with that, of course, is that the likelihood of Alzheimer's disease is increased. The more we know about both of these diagnoses, the better we can approach treatment and, in the case of Alzheimer's disease, prevention and cure. Those of you who subscribe to the My Alliance newsletter will have seen our research focus for this week is a study called ABATE, which is a possible vaccine for people who have Down syndrome, a vaccine against their development of Alzheimer's disease. So that's, I think, pretty groundbreaking, and we're really very encouraged and gratified by the folks with Down syndrome who are willing to participate in that study, because not only will it give us some insight into perhaps treating Alzheimer's disease in a person with Down syndrome, it will give us some insight into Alzheimer's disease in other populations. So that's going to be a really great forward move for all of us.
It's great news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So, in case you were wondering, now how are we making this connection in terms of Down syndrome and Alzheimer's? That's one reason of many. And of course, as you all will know by the end of this conversation, at the KU ADRC, we are committed to figuring out how to enhance brain health for all of us. All of us have a brain, and we're using it today by being on the webinar, and we want to encourage people to use their brains in the most healthy ways possible to have the best quality of life. So we're always interested in any insight we can have in terms of brain health and keeping ourselves in good shape. So Mr. Newsom, back to you. I would say that I have a favorite part of your book, but then I would change my mind and say, no, this other part is my favorite. And all of it is just so insightful. And I really enjoyed EJ's chapter on kind of how he spends his time and his days, and that he had at one point a job at Goodwill, and of course all of his travels around the world with you, and getting to sing on stage with Toni Braxton. And to go to on a helicopter ride. And my goodness, I think EJ lives a very great life that I'm a bit envious of. Can you tell us a little bit more about how he spends his days, and why is he not on the webinar with us today?
Well, because thank you for asking. Because he has a job. He works. He works at almost at Panera, but he works at Panera Bread, and he actually gets off work at 2:00.
Okay.
It just so happened that my wife is going to be available to pick him up at 2:00, and so, but he likes getting about and doing things. And we are traveling to Phoenix next month to the National Down Syndrome Congress's convention. he's very excited about that. But he has a job working at Panera Bread, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays, only for 3 hours from 11 until 2. And one would think that he's put in 8 hours because he pretends that he's so tired. But but he likes to do, he likes to go. We're actually flying out tomorrow to Texas for a family reunion, and so he's excited. He's an exciting guy who loves to do exciting things. And yeah, we travel many places around the world that I've wanted to expose him to many different cultures and many different kinds of things, and he loves that too.
That is fantastic. Well, I am so happy to hear that he is enjoying his work at Panera, and I'll have to remember that when I'm looking for a lunch place at some point. And yes, Mr. Newsom mentioned something I just wanted to make sure I also mentioned, and that is next month. We will all be at the Down syndrome conference in Phoenix in July. Great time of year to experience some sunshine, I'm sure. And so we will be, KU will have a table with all kinds of great information. And Mr. Newsom will have a table with his book. And we are going to hopefully meet lots of great folks there in Phoenix, and talk about our research and your book, and support for families who are experiencing similar adventures, I'm sure, and who are looking for the kind of support that your book is going to give to people. So what was it like when you thought, I know, I will write a book about my experience? What was the next step after you got this light bulb flashing over your head? How did the book come to fruition?
Well, actually, I started writing the book probably about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And you mentioned that one of my siblings came up with this great idea. Let's do a book. Well, it was not a book at first, just a 500-page, a 500-word description of what our experience was with our father. And so I sat down, so I put my book on hold, and I started writing this book. So even for that book, I wrote about 9,000 words. And my oldest brother, who was deceased, I wrote his chapter that was about 10,000 words. But the discipline that it takes is tremendous because, and so, but when I started writing, Kelly, words just started coming to me. I made outlines about different segments of my life. And, you know, uh, if I were to be honest with you, and I don't think I've shared this with anybody else, was when I when I started writing the book, it really had a different tone from the standpoint of really asking God questions about why this or why that. But when I got into the book, my questions really changed from why not me?
Mhm.
What has been, what do I have to be able to share with the world about about this subject matter? And the more I thought about it, and I just thought after 44, 45 years of being a father, I should have something to say. And so I started writing, and things started coming to me. And I really went back in time from the time that I was about 4 years old and started thinking, okay, now what was my life like then? And what about that time period that really helped me to grow into knowing what it meant to be loving family. So, part of a family who loves and a part of a family who gives. Then I got older, and as you mentioned before, that I was drafted into the military, and I served in combat as a combat paratrooper. And so even I learned, so many things, growing up through that level that really told me that I'm prepared for this journey, no matter what it is. And so my son was not born until after after I came home from the military, but I just knew that there was something inside of me that I wanted to share with somebody else, and who may have very different experiences from mine, but whatever the experiences that another one has, it is experiences that really can paint a good picture as to how that preparation comes about. And, and and there's no school that you can go to teach you how to be a father of a child with special needs. One has to really develop his own school and his own abilities, his own desire to make things happen. So that's how I got into the book, and that's how I wrote it, and that's what kept me pressing forward. Another thing that kept me pressing forward was after I really got started, every single day, my son would ask me, Dad, how's the book coming? What can I do to help you? I want to be involved with it also. And so, yeah, he was very intricately involved, with the book. I sat down with him and I interviewed him and said, okay, what do you think about this? And all the pictures that are in the book, he chose all the pictures that are in the book. And but anyway, so that was my experience, and so that was a great time that I had, putting this book together.
Excellent. We have a really great question. Thank you from Buddy in the chat. And Buddy wants to know your point of view on inclusive education for people with Down syndrome.
Well, I'm a strong supporter of inclusion. As a matter of fact, when my son started school, there was there was almost no talk at all about inclusion. And because of that, I became an activist and got involved politically. I was elected to the school board, and I made certain, at least at that time, that every child, had the opportunity to be in a classroom that was teaching him uh, in a way that all other students were being taught, and that he should not have been excluded in any part of his education. And so, because of that, I was able to help him and others, really get involved with an inclusive education.
Yeah, very good. There's a section in the book about your activism. I won't spoil it, but there is a very clear commitment on Mr. Newsom's part to ensure inclusion, which is super important for all kinds of populations. So we're glad to read about that. We are, as always, I act surprised. I don't know why I'm ever surprised that our time is almost up. But if anybody has any more questions, feel free to drop something in the chat. I see that Ed Keller has let us know about his brother Tom, born with Down syndrome in 1960s. And the expectations certainly have changed over the years. And Tom was eventually able to hold a job at UC Davis. California strikes again. Held a job at UC Davis, washing dishes and riding a public bus to work. And that's so important. I mean, all of us want to find meaning in our lives, and that's no less true for someone who has a diagnosis of Down syndrome or Alzheimer's or any number of other brain challenges. So thank you, Mr. Keller, for sharing that with us. Thank you, Mr. Newsom, for sharing your and EJ's story. I put in the chat a bit ago, if you'd like your own copy of Mr. Newsom's book, you can go to ednewsom.com and get a copy, and he probably will even autograph it for you. So check that out at ednewsom.com. We also will be purchasing a copy for the lending library at KU ADRC. I think we'll hope to get that hardcover copy from you, Mr. Newsom, to have in the KU library, so that folks can access it there. And so that will be available hopefully as soon as possible. I will tell everyone that next week, our speaker, I know a lot of you have been anxiously awaiting this. We had been scheduled to talk about metformin, the diabetes drug metformin, back in April, and had to postpone that. And our very own Dr. Heather Wilkins, one of our PhDs at KU, is going to pick that topic up for us. So next Thursday, Dr. Wilkins will be with us answering questions about metformin and Alzheimer's and what one might have to do with the other. If you have a question that's specifically about that topic that you want her to answer, send an email to myalliance@kumc.edu as soon as possible so she can have time to think about answers. And that will be our topic for next Thursday, 2 o'clock. Until then, everybody have a great time. Mr. Newsom, happy trails on your upcoming travels. And if I don't see you before, I'll see you in Phoenix for the National Down Syndrome Congress event. And everybody else, I can promise you that both of us will be doing our very best to share information. And also, I intend on a couple other things, and that is learning information that I can bring back to KU to share. And also, EJ and I promised EJ, or I made him promise me that he has to dance with me at the dance party at the Down
You
Syndrome
will.
meeting in Phoenix. I'm going to hold him to it. So I hope to cut a rug with him. I look forward to seeing both of you in Phoenix. Thank you for being here today, and thank you all for being with us today. And I will get the recording posted sometime this afternoon, probably. All right. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.